Her stepmother sold her to slave traders until a human man rescued her. Amara was just 14 years old, but the weight of the world already seemed to rest on her small shoulders. She lived in a tiny village surrounded by green hills and dusty paths, where the sun shone brightly during the day, but the nights were cold and silent. The village was poor, and most families struggled to make ends meet, including Amara's. Her father had passed away when she was only a little girl, leaving her and her mother to manage alone. For a while, life had been difficult, but there had been love and care in the home. After her mother passed away, however, everything changed. Her father's absence had left a hole in her life, but losing her mother was a pain that she could hardly put into words. The one person who was supposed to care for her now was her stepmother. From the moment Amara's stepmother took over the house, life became almost unbearable. Her stepmother had a stern face, sharp eyes, and a voice that could chill anyone's heart. She rarely smiled and never seemed happy with anything Amara did. She made Amara do endless chores, fetching water from the well, cleaning the small, crowded house, tending to the tiny garden, and cooking simple meals. No matter how hard Amara worked, her stepmother always found something to complain about. If the dishes were not clean enough, if the clothes were not folded just right, or if Amara asked for a moment to rest, she would be scolded harshly. Amara tried to speak up sometimes, hoping to explain that she was tired or that she needed a little kindness, but her stepmother's words were sharp and cold. "Work harder, Amara," she would say. "You are useless if you cannot do what is needed." These words pierced Amara's heart every time, but she learned quickly to keep silent. She worked quietly, hiding her sadness behind a small, brave smile. Despite the harshness at home, Amara's spirit was not completely broken. She loved the small joys of life. The way the sunlight glimmered on the hills in the morning, the songs of birds outside her window, the smell of fresh bread from the baker in the village, and the rare, kind smiles of neighbors who remembered her mother. These moments were small but precious, and they reminded her that life could be beautiful even in the hardest times. However, as months went by, Amara began to notice something darker about her stepmother. She seemed more interested in money than anything else. She would whisper to herself about debts, about the village merchants, and about how much she could gain if she found a way to earn more. At first, Amara did not understand. She was just a child, and money and greed seemed like adult problems she could not fully comprehend. But soon she began to feel fear, not for herself directly, but for the way her stepmother's eyes would light up at thoughts of wealth, as if people or even children were just things to be used. One evening, after a long day of chores, Amara sat outside the small house, brushing the dirt from her worn shoes. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She tried to feel calm, to enjoy the quiet beauty around her, but she could not shake the uneasy feeling that something was wrong. She had overheard her stepmother speaking in hushed tones to strangers who came to the house late at night. The words were vague, but they sounded threatening and secretive. Amara's stomach churned with worry. She tried to speak to the neighbors to ask if they knew what was happening, but the village was quiet, and people rarely interfered in each other's affairs. The weeks passed, and the whispers grew louder. Amara's stepmother began to make strange arrangements when no one was looking. She would leave the house for long periods, returning with coins in her hand, her face harder than before. Amara, young and innocent, began to fear that her stepmother might do something terrible, something that could separate her from the life she still clung to. Then came the night that changed everything. Amara was woken by the sound of quiet footsteps in the house. She tried to get up, but her stepmother's stern voice stopped her. "Stay where you are, do not move or you will regret it," she whispered sharply. Amara's heart pounded in her chest. She did as she was told, holding her breath, listening to the noises that seemed to come closer and closer. She could hear voices outside, low and unfamiliar, speaking in harsh tones she had never heard before. Fear gripped her completely. The door opened slowly, and men stepped inside. Amara could not see their faces clearly, but she could sense danger. Her stepmother spoke to them quietly, almost smiling, and Amara realized with a sudden, crushing fear that she had been betrayed. Her own stepmother had made a plan that involved handing Amara over to strangers. Amara wanted to cry out, to beg, to plead, but the fear was too strong, and her stepmother's presence was terrifying. She realized that she had no choice. The strangers moved toward her, and with shaking hands, Amara was taken from the only home she had left. The night air was cold against her face as they led her down dusty paths, away from the village, away from everything she had ever known. The journey was long and frightening. Amara was blindfolded so she could not see where they were taking her. Every sound seemed louder, the crack of dry twigs underfoot, the low murmurs of the strangers, the distant barking of dogs. She tried to remember her father's face, her mother's laugh, the warmth of her bed, the small joys she had clung to in the past months. These memories were her only comfort in the darkness. As hours passed, Amara's fear grew. She did not understand why her stepmother would do such a thing. How could someone she trusted, someone who was supposed to care for her, decide that money was more important than her life? The thought made her stomach twist and tears burned her eyes, but she could not cry openly. She had to stay strong. She had to survive. Finally, after what felt like an endless night, Amara was led to a small, unfamiliar house. The strangers spoke quietly to each other, and Amara could sense that this was not the end, but only the beginning of a frightening new reality. She tried to steel herself to prepare for whatever might come next. She whispered a small prayer, asking for courage, for protection, and for a chance to escape the danger she could not yet see clearly. Despite the fear, a small spark of hope remained in Amara's heart. She had survived hardships before, and she believed deep down that perhaps someday someone would come to help her. Someone who would see her not as an object or a burden, but as a human being deserving of kindness and freedom. Until then, she promised herself that she would stay strong, keep her mind alert, and watch for any opportunity to change her fate. As she sat in the darkness, listening to the quiet murmurs of the strangers outside, Amara realized that life had grown much harder in just a few short months. She had lost her mother, her home, and the trust she once had in her stepmother. Yet in the midst of fear and betrayal, she discovered a small but powerful truth. She had the strength to endure. She was small and she was alone, but her heart was brave and her spirit refused to break. That night marked the beginning of a new chapter in Amara's life, one filled with uncertainty, fear, and unimaginable challenges. Yet, it also marked the moment she learned the importance of resilience, hope, and courage. No matter what the strangers intended, no matter how harsh her stepmother's betrayal, Amara knew she had the inner strength to face the coming trials. She did not yet know how she would survive or who might help her, but she held on to one simple truth: she would not give up. And so, as the first light of dawn touched the horizon, Amara sat quietly, listening to the world around her, ready to face whatever the day would bring. Her life had changed forever, but somewhere deep inside, the young girl still believed that kindness, love, and freedom were possible. And with that belief, she prepared herself for the long and difficult journey ahead. Amara's eyes were still adjusting to the dim light of the small, unfamiliar house when she realized that the reality of her situation was far worse than anything she had imagined. Her stepmother's betrayal had led her here, and though she did not yet understand what awaited her, the sense of fear that filled her chest was almost suffocating. Every sound, the creaking of the floorboards, the soft shuffle of feet, the low murmur of voices, made her heart race. She had no idea where she was, or who the strangers were that had brought her here, and that uncertainty made everything feel even more frightening. She tried to stand, but her legs felt weak and unsteady. The world around her seemed strange and unfamiliar. The walls were bare and cold, and the furniture was sparse and simple. There was a small bed in one corner, but it looked hard and uncomfortable. Amara's mind raced as she tried to think of a plan, a way to escape, or at least a way to understand what was happening. She wished desperately that her father were there, or that her mother had lived, because she would have felt safer, protected. But she was alone, and the only person she had trusted had turned against her. The strangers spoke quietly among themselves, but their words were muffled. Amara could not make out what they were saying, though she could feel their intentions pressing down on her. She tried to listen closely, hoping to gather some clue about where she was, who these people were, or what they wanted from her. But everything was unclear. She felt a tight knot of fear twist in her stomach. Hours passed slowly. Amara sat on the hard floor, hugging her knees to her chest. She tried to remember the happy moments of her life, to keep her mind from sinking too deeply into fear. She remembered the smell of fresh bread from the baker, the laughter she had shared with her mother, the bright green hills around her village, and even the small, comforting presence of her father in the few memories she had left. These thoughts gave her a tiny spark of strength. As evening approached, one of the strangers came closer to her. He was tall, with a serious expression, but he did not seem angry. He spoke softly, though Amara could not understand his words at first. She was too afraid to move, too afraid to respond. The stranger motioned for her to follow, and though her heart raced, Amara realized that this was the moment she had to act. Slowly, carefully, she stood up. Her legs shook, but she forced herself to walk beside him. The stranger led her through a series of narrow, winding streets, all of which looked unfamiliar. The world outside was dark, and the sounds of the village she knew were gone. Instead, there were noises of other people moving quietly, footsteps on dirt paths, and the distant sound of animals stirring in the night. Amara's mind was filled with questions. Where were they taking her? Who were these people? And most importantly, why had her stepmother betrayed her in such a cruel way? As they walked, Amara tried to make sense of everything. She thought about her stepmother's greed, the strange whispers she had overheard, and the mysterious visitors who had come to the house at night. Slowly, the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. Her stepmother had made a plan to send her away for money. She had been treated not as a child to care for, but as something that could be sold, something with a price. The thought made Amara's chest tighten with sadness and anger, but she forced herself to remain silent. She had learned long ago that anger would not help her survive. Finally, they arrived at another house. This one was larger, with high walls and a heavy wooden door. Amara could see that the place was not a normal home. It had barred windows and a locked gate, and there was an air of secrecy that made her heart pound. She was guided inside, and the stranger left her alone in a small room. The room was bare, with only a thin mat on the floor and a small window near the ceiling that let in a sliver of light. Amara sat on the mat, hugging her knees. She felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her. She did not know how long she would be here or what the future held. The fear of the unknown was almost as heavy as the fear of what she had already experienced. She thought about her village, about the life she had lost, and about the people she had trusted. Everything seemed so far away, and yet it felt as though she could still hear her stepmother's voice in her mind, telling her to work harder, to obey, to accept her fate. Days passed slowly. Amara was given small amounts of food, simple and plain, and she was told to stay in the small room most of the time. She was not allowed to leave, and she had very little contact with the outside world. The isolation was difficult. She felt lonely and forgotten, as if the world had moved on without her. She spent hours thinking, remembering, and imagining a life where she was free again. Despite the fear and uncertainty, Amara did not give up hope. She watched carefully, learning the routines of the strangers around her. She noticed when doors were unlocked, when footsteps moved slowly, and when there were moments of quiet when no one was watching closely. She knew that if she could be patient, if she could wait for the right moment, there might be a way to escape. She held onto that hope tightly, because without hope, she felt she would not survive. One day, Amara overheard a conversation between two of the strangers. They were speaking about plans, about moving her to another location. Her heart sank, but she also realized that she now had a small piece of information she could use. She began to think carefully, imagining what she could do, how she could act, and how she could protect herself. She knew that running blindly would not help her. She had to be smart, patient, and careful. As the days turned into weeks, Amara learned more about the world around her. She observed the strangers, their habits, and the small routines that controlled their days. She discovered moments when she could move quietly, when she could peek through the window, and when she could speak softly to herself to keep her mind strong. She discovered that even in the darkest times, small actions and careful thinking could make a difference. Amara also began to understand the importance of inner strength. She reminded herself every day that she was not helpless. She could not change the past, but she could take steps to shape her future. She practiced patience, careful observation, and silent planning. She reminded herself of the kindness she had known in the past, the neighbors who had smiled at her, the memories of her parents, and the hope that someday someone good would come into her life to help her. Despite the fear, Amara never stopped dreaming. She imagined the moment she could run free again, the day she could see the hills of her village, the time she could feel sunlight on her face without worry. These dreams became her strength. They reminded her that the world outside was bigger than the small room she was trapped in, and that freedom and kindness were still possible. One evening, as she sat quietly on the mat, listening to the low murmur of voices outside, Amara made a silent promise to herself. She promised that no matter what happened, she would not let the fear and cruelty of others destroy her spirit. She would stay strong, keep her mind sharp, and wait for the right opportunity. She would survive, and someday she would find a way to be free. In those quiet moments, Amara began to understand something important. Life could be cruel and unfair, but it could also be full of courage, hope, and strength. She realized that her experiences, as difficult and frightening as they were, had made her stronger. She could feel the small but growing power inside her, the determination to endure, to survive, and to reclaim her life. And so, day by day, Amara learned to adapt. She learned to observe, to wait, and to plan. She learned to hold on to hope, even when the world seemed dark and uncertain. Though the fear and uncertainty never left her completely, she discovered that the human spirit could endure incredible challenges. She learned that patience and courage could be as powerful as any weapon. Little did Amara know, her story was far from over. There were challenges ahead, but there was also the possibility of kindness, hope, and rescue. And in the quiet moments, as she looked through the small window and imagined the world beyond, she held onto that hope with all her heart, knowing that one day she might find a way to be free again. Amara had been in the strange, unfamiliar house for several weeks now. Each day was a test of her patience, her courage, and her ability to remain calm under pressure. She had learned to be quiet, to stay out of sight, and to observe everything carefully. Though she was still very young, her mind had grown sharper and her spirit stronger. She understood that she had to be careful if she wanted to survive. The people around her, though not openly cruel, were strict and unyielding. They had routines and rules, and Amara had to follow them without question. She was given small tasks to do, simple chores that took little time but demanded attention. She would clean the floors, carry small loads, and organize objects in the rooms. Each task was done quietly with her heart racing, but she noticed small details about her surroundings. Every detail mattered, when doors were unlocked, when footsteps slowed, and when windows were left slightly open. These observations became a map in her mind, a plan forming quietly for the day she might need it. Amara's days began early. The sunlight that managed to sneak through the small window woke her each morning. She would rise quietly, careful not to make a sound that could alert anyone to her presence. She would stretch her stiff limbs and look around, making sure the room was empty. Then she would start her chores, moving slowly but steadily, trying not to draw attention. Each day felt long, but she understood that time was both a challenge and an opportunity. Meals were simple, plain, and small. She had little to eat, but what she received was enough to keep her alive. She had learned to eat slowly, to ration each piece of food carefully, and to hide a small portion in her clothing when she could. These small acts of careful planning gave her a sense of control in a world that seemed determined to take everything from her. Though she was hungry at times, she knew that patience was key. She could not afford to act without thinking. Despite the monotony and isolation, Amara found ways to keep her mind active. She would remember stories her mother had told her as a little girl, tales of courage, hope, and adventure. She would imagine herself walking freely through the green hills of her village, feeling the sun on her face, and hearing the laughter of children playing nearby. These thoughts became her secret refuge, a place where she could escape from the fear and uncertainty that surrounded her. Amara also learned the importance of listening. She listened to every word spoken around her, picking up on small hints about what might happen next. She learned the rhythms of the household, the times when people came and went, the quiet hours when she could move freely, and the moments when she had to hide completely. She began to understand that information was power. The more she listened, the more she could prepare herself for whatever came next. One day, as she was carrying out her chores, Amara overheard a conversation that made her heart beat faster. Two of the people in the house were speaking quietly about plans to move her again. They spoke in hushed tones, careful not to be overheard, but their words were clear enough for Amara to understand that she would be taken to a different location soon. Fear surged through her, but so did determination. This was the moment she had been preparing for. She had to be ready. Amara spent the next days carefully observing the guards, the doors, and the routines of the household. She learned which doors could be unlocked, which windows were slightly loose, and which paths were the quietest. Every observation added to the plan that was forming in her mind. She knew that she could not rely on luck. She would need courage, patience, and intelligence to create an opportunity to escape. During this time, Amara also reflected on her own feelings. She felt a mixture of fear, sadness, and anger. She was angry at her stepmother for betraying her, at the people who had taken her, and at the world that seemed so unfair. But she also felt something else, a quiet, growing strength inside her. She realized that despite all the hardships, she was not powerless. She could think, she could observe, and she could plan. She could endure. And perhaps one day she could be free again. Amara's isolation gave her time to develop resilience. She learned to control her emotions, to keep fear from overwhelming her, and to focus on small victories each day. Even the simplest successes, completing a task without mistake, remembering a detail about the house, or quietly moving from one room to another, became reasons to feel proud. These small victories built her confidence and gave her the courage to face the larger challenges ahead. At night, when the house was quiet, Amara would sometimes lie awake on her thin mat, thinking about her family, her village, and the life she had lost. She remembered her mother's gentle hands, her father's encouraging words, and the laughter that had once filled her home. These memories brought both pain and comfort. They reminded her of what had been taken from her, but they also reminded her of the strength she carried within. In those quiet hours, Amara also began to notice small acts of kindness from the world around her. A bird singing outside the window, a breeze brushing against her face, and the soft light of the moon through the small opening. All these small comforts reminded her that life still had beauty. Even in the darkest times, she realized, small moments of hope could give strength. As the days turned into weeks, Amara began to prepare herself mentally for the journey ahead. She knew that escape would not be easy. It would require careful planning, courage, and patience. She began to think about where she might go if she managed to leave the house. She imagined finding someone kind, someone who could help her and protect her from the dangers she had faced. These thoughts became a guiding light, helping her remain focused and determined. Amara also learned to be creative with her thinking. She imagined different scenarios, practiced how she might move quietly, and thought through every possible outcome. She realized that careful planning could turn small opportunities into chances for freedom. The knowledge that she had some control over her future gave her hope. It reminded her that she was not completely powerless. One afternoon, while completing a chore, Amara noticed something unusual. A window on the upper floor had been left slightly open. The latch was loose, and the sunlight poured through the gap, creating a bright strip of light on the floor. Amara's heart raced. This could be an opportunity. She examined the window carefully, noticing that it could be opened wider if she moved quietly and at the right moment. The thought of escape filled her with hope, but also with caution. She knew that timing would be everything. That evening, as the house grew quiet, Amara prepared herself. She practiced moving silently, imagining herself slipping through the window without making a sound. She reminded herself to be patient and careful, to wait for the right moment. The thought of freedom gave her energy, but she also knew that she could not act recklessly. The stakes were high, and she had to be smart. The days that followed were filled with observation, preparation, and careful planning. Amara watched the routines of the people in the house, noted the times when the guards were distracted, and practiced moving quietly from one room to another. Each day brought her closer to understanding the perfect moment to act. She realized that patience and preparation were as important as courage. During this time, Amara also reflected on the lessons she had learned. She had learned to be brave in the face of fear, to remain calm under pressure, and to find strength in small victories. She had learned that hope was a powerful tool, and that even in difficult circumstances, careful planning and determination could create opportunities. These lessons became a part of her daily routine, shaping her thoughts, actions, and dreams. One night, as the moonlight filled the room, Amara sat quietly, thinking about the future. She knew that the next steps in her life would be difficult, but she also felt a quiet confidence. She had survived challenges before, and she knew she could survive what was to come. She reminded herself that freedom, kindness, and safety were possible, and that she would find a way to reach them. Amara understood that the journey ahead would not only test her courage, but also her intelligence and patience. Every small action mattered, every decision could shape the outcome, and every moment required careful thought. She knew that the world outside the small house held both danger and opportunity, and she was determined to navigate it with care. And so, as the first light of dawn touched the horizon, Amara sat quietly on her mat, ready for another day. She had learned to observe, to plan, and to dream. Though the fear and uncertainty never left her completely, she had discovered a quiet, growing strength inside herself, a strength that would guide her through the challenges ahead. She was not powerless. She was resilient, brave, and hopeful. And with that strength, she would continue to endure, to wait for the right moment, and to take the first step toward Amara had been in the strange house for many weeks, maybe even months. Each day was the same in some ways, waking up on the hard mat, completing chores quietly, observing the routines of the people around her. Yet, she had learned to pay attention to every detail, and her mind was sharper than it had ever been. She knew that patience was her ally and courage her secret weapon. Deep inside, a quiet hope had begun to grow, a hope that someday someone kind would come and help her. She never knew exactly what time it was, but she noticed changes in the light outside her small window. The mornings brought pale sunlight, the afternoons were warm, and the evenings were soft and cool. Amara would watch the shadows move across the floor, timing her movements carefully to avoid being noticed. She had learned the importance of careful observation. Even small mistakes could be dangerous, and she could not afford to make them. One morning, while completing her chores, Amara overheard voices in the house that made her heart beat faster. Two men were speaking quietly in the corner, discussing a visitor who was expected that day. They mentioned someone who had been asking questions about the house, someone who wanted to know about the routines and the people inside. Amara's curiosity was sparked immediately. Could this person be someone who could help her? Could this be the moment she had been waiting for? She listened carefully as the men spoke. They mentioned that the visitor was a kind-hearted man who often helped children and families who were in difficult situations. Amara's heart leapt. Could it be possible that someone like this could find her, even here? She felt a spark of hope that she had not dared to feel for many weeks. Her mind raced with possibilities. She had dreamed of freedom, and perhaps now the dream could come true. That afternoon, the visitor arrived. Amara could hear his voice, calm and gentle, speaking to the people in the house. He asked questions politely, listening carefully to their answers. He did not shout or demand. Instead, there was a quiet confidence in his tone, a sense of purpose that made Amara's heart swell with hope. She had never heard a voice like that before, a voice that promised safety, kindness, and understanding. Amara observed carefully from her small window, her eyes wide with both fear and anticipation. She could see the man moving slowly, noting the details of the house, the locks on the doors, and the routines of the people inside. He seemed calm, yet determined, as if he had a plan but was willing to wait for the perfect moment to act. Amara's mind raced. Could this man really be here to help her? Could this be the chance she had been waiting for? As the day turned to evening, the man spoke quietly to the people in the house again. He asked them to leave a small door unlocked and to allow him to see one of the rooms. The strangers hesitated, but they eventually agreed, either out of politeness or perhaps because they did not fully understand the man's intentions. Amara watched with bated breath. She knew that this could be her opportunity. Every movement, every sound, every second mattered. Finally, the moment came. One of the strangers opened the door to her room, and Amara saw the man for the first time. He was tall and kind-looking, with gentle eyes that seemed to see beyond her small, frightened frame. He smiled softly, not in a way that frightened her, but in a way that made her feel safe. Amara felt tears prick her eyes. She had dreamed of a moment like this for weeks, and now it was happening. The man knelt down to her level and spoke softly. "Hello," he said. "My name is David. I am here to help you. You are safe now." Amara felt her heart leap. Could this really be true? Could she finally be free from the fear that had controlled her life for so long? She wanted to speak, to say something, but the words caught in her throat. She simply nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. David extended his hand gently, giving her a choice rather than forcing her to move. Amara took a deep breath, summoning all her courage, and reached for his hand. The moment she touched it, a wave of relief and hope washed over her. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, she felt that someone truly cared about her safety and well-being. Her fear did not disappear entirely, but it became manageable. There was a light in the darkness, and it was guiding her toward freedom. David spoke quietly, giving her instructions in simple, calm words. He told her to stay close, to move quietly, and to trust him. Amara followed his instructions carefully, her heart pounding with both fear and excitement. She had spent so long imagining this moment, and now it was real. Every step she took toward the door, toward the world outside, felt like a step toward a life she had once thought was lost forever. The journey out of the house was tense. Amara and David moved slowly, avoiding the people who might notice them. Every shadow seemed to hold a potential threat, every sound made her heart leap. But David's presence was calming. He moved confidently, guiding her carefully, showing her that safety could exist even in a frightening situation. Amara realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. When they finally reached the gate and stepped into the cool evening air, Amara felt a rush of emotion she could hardly describe. The world outside the house was different from what she had remembered, yet it was full of possibility. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange from the setting sun, and the breeze carried the scent of the trees and grass. For the first time in weeks, Amara felt that the world could be kind again. David led her to a safe place where she could rest and begin to process what had just happened. He gave her water and food, and he allowed her to speak freely about her experiences. Amara told him about her stepmother, about the strangers, and about the fear and loneliness she had endured. David listened patiently, never interrupting, never judging. He offered comfort and reassurance, showing her that trust and safety were possible. Over the next few days, Amara began to feel a sense of normalcy returning to her life. She was still cautious, still aware of the dangers that had existed in her world, but she also began to experience hope in a way she had not in a long time. She started to smile again, to laugh quietly at small jokes, and to imagine a future where she could be free from fear. David encouraged her to pursue small activities, reading, drawing, and walking outside. Each small act was a step toward healing, a reminder that life could be safe and even joyful again. Amara also began to think about the lessons she had learned during her time in the house. She realized that she had grown stronger, braver, and smarter because of her experiences. She had learned to observe, to plan, and to act with caution. She had learned to hold on to hope even when the world seemed dark and uncertain. These lessons became part of her new life, guiding her as she adjusted to safety and freedom. Despite the relief and happiness she felt, Amara knew that healing would take time. She still remembered the fear, the loneliness, and the betrayal. These memories were a part of her, but they no longer controlled her. She had survived, and she had been rescued by someone who cared about her safety and well-being. That realization filled her with gratitude and determination. She would use this second chance to live fully and to find her place in a world that could be kind and just. David also began to teach Amara about the importance of helping others. He explained that there were many children and families who faced challenges and dangers similar to what she had experienced. Amara listened carefully, inspired by the idea that she could one day make a difference in the lives of others. The thought of helping someone else gave her purpose and hope, reinforcing the courage she had discovered within herself. As the days turned into weeks, Amara's confidence grew. She began to explore her surroundings safely, enjoying the beauty of the natural world around her. She marveled at the trees, the flowers, and the sky. She noticed small animals, listened to birds singing, and felt the warmth of sunlight on her face. These simple joys, which she had once taken for granted, now felt precious and full of meaning. She realized that life was not just about survival. It was about noticing the beauty, finding hope, and building a future. Amara also started to form a bond with David based on trust, respect, and kindness. He never pressured her, never forced her to speak before she was ready, and always allowed her to make choices about her own life. This respect and care helped Amara rebuild her confidence and sense of self. She learned that there were people in the world who could be trusted, who could offer guidance and protection without expecting anything in return. In the evenings, Amara would sit quietly, reflecting on how far she had come. She thought about her stepmother, the strangers, and the fear she had endured. She acknowledged the pain, but she also celebrated her courage and resilience. She realized that she had survived unimaginable challenges, and that survival had made her stronger. She had learned to hope, to plan, and to trust carefully. And now, with her life slowly returning to safety, she could begin to dream about a future filled with possibility. Amara's rescue was not just a moment of physical freedom. It was the beginning of a new life. It marked the start of a journey where she could learn, grow, and heal. She had faced fear, betrayal, and uncertainty, and yet she had endured. She had discovered her own strength, and she had met someone who believed in her and helped her reclaim her life. The experience transformed her, instilling lessons of courage, patience, and hope that would guide her forever. Even though challenges still remained, Amara now understood that she could face them. She had been brave before, and she could be brave again. She had been alone before, and she had survived. Now, with guidance, care, and a renewed sense of purpose, she could step into a world that held promise. She could imagine a life where safety, kindness, and happiness were not just dreams, but realities she could pursue. And so, as the first rays of dawn lit the sky once more, Amara sat quietly, feeling the warmth of hope in her heart. She had been rescued, she had survived, and she had discovered a strength she never knew she had. The future was uncertain, but it was hers to shape. And for the first time in many weeks, she smiled. Not with fear, not with hesitation, but with the quiet joy of knowing that she was free, safe, and ready to begin again.